mechanism to accumulate college credit. Rather, the 4+ programming was a means to provide a free, appropriate public education. And by definition, a free, appropriate public education is an elementary or a secondary education. So 4+ programming, by definition, is secondary programming, which may occur on a college, community college campus. So since these programs are, by definition, secondary programs required for a FAPE, that puts some of the discussions with community college partners in a different light. The standard for 4+ programs is the standard for any other IEP. Free, appropriate public education, reasonably calculated to confer educational benefit. The standard is not sort of achieving one's potential on the college campus or the community college campus. Since by definition these programs are FAPE, free, appropriate public education, they must be individualized. And that, in working through this document and helping the folks who actually know what they're talking about prepare it, one of the questions that came up, or the concerns that came up, were a lot of 4+ programs would develop look-alike IEPs. So if you are in the 4+ program at Blast or Vital, to me, all of their names sound like sports cars or chewing gums. So if you're at Blast, everybody gets the same goals, everybody gets the same progress measurement, everybody gets the same finger quotes, specially designed instruction, and that just can't be. There needs to be some level of individualization. Since these are free, appropriate programs designed to provide a FAPE, they must be under the supervision of the district of residence, the secondary school. It's not sufficient to say, okay, community college, the baton is passed, you write the IEPs, you do the progress measurement, you just tell us where to send the check. These programs must be under the general supervision of the public school district that is tuitioning or sending students to these programs. So if I'm District X and I send a child to the Blast program or the AMP program, that program is still responsible to me for accountability, for results, for inviting me to the IEP team. Since these programs are under the general supervision and control of, since these are secondary programs, the 4+ program cannot unilaterally rewrite IEPs. Oh, I know that's what that IEP said when you were in high school, even though you still are. I know that's what that IEP says, but that's not how we do things here. Let's rewrite. The public agency, the secondary school, must still be involved in the IEP process, must still have weight in the IEP process. A couple of things regarding finance, and then we'll turn it over to some either out loud or in the chat box questions about this document. The document is linked in two places. It's linked in the meeting agenda on the right-hand side, and it's also linked in the current legal topics. That links to my outline that I'm speaking from today. So in two places in your materials, it's linked. So one of the things about, for finance purposes, is the school retains accountability. The 4+ program is under the direction and control of the school, and the billable expenses from the community college to the school must be necessary to provide a FAPE. And it would be inappropriate to say, since you are at our 4+ program, you automatically generate weight X. You're automatically a level 2 if you come to our program, because everybody here is level 2, and we need everybody here to be level 2 to maintain our costs. And that's just inappropriate. That's making decisions based on the child's placement rather than the child's actual needs. So the guidance document provides greater detail about finance, about the guidance document includes a link to a sample contract between a school district and a community college. The community college is providing the 4+ program. So any questions, either type them into the chat box or shout out if you have any questions about the 4+ programs. The intent here is to make sure that 4+ programs are true to their mission, and that mission is providing a free public education to students who are still, as a matter of law, secondary students. Well, if you have any questions, we'll come back to them if there's time at the end. I know the next topic has been a little bit of a hot topic around internally and around the state, and that is changes to the graduation requirements. It is the first clear bullet under guest presenter. Up until recently, it's been permissible to award a regular high school diploma based on goal completion. So if I complete my goals, I get a regular high school diploma. The problem is, up until recently, Iowa had no statewide content standards or statewide graduation requirements, as opposed to other states which have end of course exams, end of unit exams, required exams at the end of algebra, required exams at the end of civics, state required exams to graduate. We have none of that in Iowa, but we do have 4333, and students must complete 4333 as a matter of state law to receive a Iowa high school diploma. So Iowa special education law has to conform to this because our special education students are general education students also. So if I am to receive a high school diploma, it must be fully aligned to state standards, which means it must be fully aligned to 4333, which means we are need to go through the process of staging out or phasing out goals-only diplomas. The immediacy of this is there's going to be no effect on the class of 2017 or 2018. There will be a staging, there'll be staging and implementation and rollout of this with guidance from the department provided this summer about how to think through the 4333 lens for students who you normally have thought about graduation based on goals. So again, no effect on classes of 2017 or 2018. Guidance document coming this summer. The effect on future classes will be described in that guidance document. And then once that guidance document is released, the grades, diplomas, transcripts document will be revised this summer. The purpose of that revision would be to make that document clearly about how decisions are documented. Grades, diplomas, and transcripts are all evidence of a course or a course of study being completed or in progress. the grades, diplomas, transcripts document was not intended to determine how and when a child graduates. So the inquiries or the questions are being split out. Document number 1 this summer will be, how do we determine when a student graduates? They graduate either when they complete the district's graduation requirements, or they graduate when they complete the district's graduation requirements plus additional studies or additional training or additional services required to provide a FAPE, such as those provided at a 4+ program. And then once that is out, then we'll release grades, diplomas, and transcripts 2.0. So I'm looking through the questions on the chat box. How weighting is determined for 4+ programs. I think that answer was captured correctly. First of all, that's not the department's business. It's the AEA's business to assign weighting. But second, the document that the AEAs have put together has a special consideration for folks with 4+ programs. Ron's question about REACH, how does that fit in? It's a program operated by the University of Iowa. REACH is an interesting case in that it requires students to be high school graduates to have a high school diploma. So it's an odd fit between REACH and 4+ programs. They're still trying to, REACH has been around at the University of Iowa about as long as I've been at the department, and they're still trying to sort out how they fit into the 4+ landscape. Question, can a student graduate via IEP goals and receive a certificate of completion versus a regular diploma? Of course, yes. The question here that we're transitioning towards is, what does it mean to attain a regular high school diploma? And a regular high school diploma must be aligned to 4.333. Part of the guidance that we'll be developing, I'm saying we like I know what I'm talking about. Part of the guidance that will be developed by the content area experts of the department is how to capture evidence of completion of 4.333 for folks who might not be engaged in Carnegie unit coursework. So students who are engaging in work activities or engaging in living, learning, and working activities, can some of those goal areas count as one of the towards fulfilling 4.333? That's one of the options that my content area expert colleagues are working to help folks make decisions about. I'm certain there will be a lot of questions about changes to graduation requirements and phasing out goals-only diplomas, but if the question arises in meetings in the next year or so, class of 2017, no effect. Class of 2018, no effect. Class of 2019, most likely that will be sort of like the trial balloon year. But expect class of 2020, this year's freshmen, that document to have to be in full effect, or that policy transition to be in full effect. The last question I was asked to talk about, United States Supreme Court decided to hear a FAPE case, Andrew F. versus Douglas County Schools. In the link that I provided in the current legal topics, I've provided links to both the transcript of oral argument and the audio recording of oral argument, as well as the lower court decision under review. The question is, what does it mean to provide a free appropriate public education? The Rowley Court, Board of Education versus Rowley in 1982, established a standard of some educational benefit. If the IEP was reasonably calculated to confer some benefit, then the IEP met the IDEA's minimum standard of good enoughness. In recent years, the courts have been split. How much is some? Is some anything more than minimal, which is where our circuit lands, or is some more than that? Is it meaningful? And so the courts have split between some and meaningful, and the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to attempt to resolve that dispute. Oh, well, they will resolve it. Oral argument was last month. The justices were very confused by and struggled with, what does it mean to provide some benefit? How much is some? How much more than some is meaningful? One of the justices described all of the various FAPE standards as a blizzard of words, which struck me as kind of true, trying to explain to parents, trying to explain to general educators, what does it mean to provide a FAPE? So the Supreme Court is struggling with what it describes as a blizzard of words. Right now, there are only 8 justices on the court. Even if Judge Gorsuch is confirmed, it will remain an 8-justice court, at least as far as Andrew F., because Judge Gorsuch is on the court that Andrew F. was appealed from. And for that reason, he's conflicted out. He could not participate in the higher court's deliberation, the higher court's consideration. If the case ends in a 4-4 tie, it's as if it never happened. I have a hard time seeing how this court will come out, whether it will be 5 votes one way or 5 votes the other, because none of the justices were satisfied with either of the competing tests. They were all somewhat uncomfortable with some. Isn't that kind of a little bit trivial? But they were also equally, as a whole, uncomfortable with the concept of meaningful. Well, how do we decide if something's meaningful or not? Where's the line between meaningful and some? So that is, it was an interesting oral argument. The transcript and the sound recording of oral argument are in your materials. If you have any, if you have an hour's worth of leisure time and want to listen to Supreme Court oral argument at your desk instead of watching cat videos. So if you have any questions about that, I have no idea what they're going to do. If I have to lay an odd, I would say ever so slightly in raising the standard to meaningful. Very, very slight odds in favor of the parent here based on the sort of like the tenor and the aggressiveness of oral argument. What will that do to practice? I don't know. I think it will be, if the standard is changed, it will be tremendously destabilizing for a while. But I think that teams will continue to struggle with what a FAPE is, regardless of the standard. Some, that's a nebulous standard. Meaningful, also a nebulous standard. So I believe that if the court reverses, there will be a lot of initial instability, but that it will return to sort of a level status in a couple IEP writing seasons, maybe a couple school years of instability, and then whatever the standard is, schools are going to make reasonable evidence-based decisions. You will get requests if the court reverses for dolphin therapy or aromatherapy because, that's best. That's meaningful. There will be a lot of methodology fights that districts probably and AEAs probably thought that they had put to bed that will resurrect themselves. Well, we want vision therapy. Well, we want dolphin therapy. Well, we want aromatherapy. Well, we want phrenology. We want acupuncture. We want whatever the University of Iowa said in the identical 54-page report that they write for everybody. We want that. So there'll be a spike in those demands if the court reverses. If the court affirms, that means that the standard doesn't change. And in fact, it will lower the standards it will take the meaningful standard away in the 2 circuits that have adopted meaningful. But if it's a 4-4 tie, which is likely, it's as if the case never happened. So questions about that? Thank you for putting that on the agenda today. It sort of gratified my appellate law nerdiness. I only had one type of nerdiness. Questions in the chat box or questions from the microphones?
Questions from the field. Well,
hearing none.
Yeah. I want to know more about dolphin therapy, Thomas.
Yes. I want some too. I feel like I need to go swim with the dolphins on occasion too.
There you go.
After certain days in this current legislative session, although I'm not trying to be political.
We'll all go swimming with you.
Right.
Well, go ahead, Thomas.
I'll sort of monitor the notes, and I'll be prepared to either type into the meeting notes or answer the questions in the afternoon session. But thanks for inviting me to virtually visit with you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Thomas, so much. I appreciate your time with us and the information you shared. Very useful.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Okay. Always good to hear from Thomas. All right, now it looks like next on the agenda is Ron Russell with updates for us. Ron, you're up.
Hi, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'll just be looking at I'll just be showing some things that you have linked in your agenda as well. But just want to take a few minutes. We were fortunate to have Thomas talk to us about some kind of new and changing legal kinds of things. What I want to talk to you about just for a few minutes is not a new piece of information, but it's one we don't talk about too much, and had an opportunity in the fall Tri-State Special Ed Law Conference to hear a speaker on this topic. His name was David Hodgins, a lawyer out of Houston, and just put together a few notes to walk through this issue of how do we consider extracurricular activity participation in the IEP, because it really does, it's probably something you're coming across, and it does have the potential to be, to produce disagreement sometimes or contention. So I wanted to talk about some considerations. For future reference, if you look at your agenda on the right, you can see some links here for this Dear Colleague letter. A lot of you are familiar with these letters that have come out giving guidance to the field. This is not a new letter. This actually came out in 2013. But if you have an interest in reading further, there's a lot of in detail kind of information there. There's a fact sheet on the guidance that came out, and you can also read the full letter. But I'm going to yes.
The notes/cases regarding extracurricular participation is asking for request for access.
I'm so sorry. I can fix that quickly, I think. I am for some reason I'm having an issue here. I think it's because I have my screen sharing on. What I will do is I'm showing it right now, and as soon as I'm finished, I'll change the access so that all you have reference to it. Sorry about that, but I'll make sure I change that as soon as we're done discussing now, and I get my screen share off. But what you're seeing here, this slide here, it's just kind of very general information that is talking about real basically, what the IEP must include, special education related services, supplementary aids and services provided, all the things we're used to talking about, but sometimes it's easy to forget. The law also says, and to participate in extracurricular and other non-academic activities. And most of you will remember that on page G of the Iowa IEP, there is a section where we have to address, does the student have that opportunity? And so we're addressing that, but we just want to talk a little bit about guidance on how to handle that participation and what that really means for things like sports and music for our kids with disabilities. Some general guidance points here that I thought were really helpful. I hope they'll be helpful to you. This particular presenter, and a lot of this comes from that Dear Colleague letter, talked about what equal opportunity is and is not. And these 4 bullets here, what it is not. So giving a child with a disability equal opportunity to participate does not mean changing the essential elements of the game, if we're talking about sports, or it could be the activity. It does not mean giving the student with a disability an unfair advantage over other competitors. It does not mean changing the nature of selective teams, but rather students with disabilities, they have to compete with everyone else and legitimately earn their place on the team. And it does not mean compromising student safety. So, so those were some things that were talked about. And I just have a couple of, without giving you details on the legal cases and names and things like that, a few interesting cases that were talked about that might give you some insight on how you might think through these kinds of cases. Here was an interesting one, a case involving marching band. There was a student with autism spectrum that was removed from band due to behaviors. Interestingly, in this case, the hearing officer found that the school had violated IDEA, and in this case, it was because the district failed to provide required counseling. So it was more the idea the thought that student could participate if the school worked with that student on behaviors, and that would be a reasonable thing to do to help that student participate. Weren't asking them to change the nature of the activity per se. So that was the outcome of one case. Basketball example. Let's think about a student with a hearing impairment that wants to try out for the basketball team. I have a couple of yes/no things here. Should a sign language interpreter be provided at tryouts? If that's applicable to that student, yes, for sure, that would be a reasonable accommodation. If the student makes the team, should the interpreter be provided at practices and games? Yes, those would be reasonable accommodations. They wouldn't involve changing the nature of the game, but would provide support to that student. A track example. Again, if we have the example of a hearing impaired student participating in track, you could have visual cues to start the race. This would be a reasonable accommodation, and it also doesn't fundamentally alter the activity and wouldn't give an advantage. So again, these kinds of things that probably for most of us, these accommodations sound very reasonable. But occasionally you have districts and parents debating about whether or not these things should happen, and we have to go through the thinking process. Gymnastics club. There was a case of a diabetic student that was covered under Section 504 in this particular case versus an IEP. Parents wanted glucose testing and insulin administration after school. Must the school provide? Yes, was a conclusion. That was a necessary piece of assistance and accommodation to allow that student access to the activity. Didn't change the nature of gymnastics. It did potentially give a cost to the district to have someone to help with those kinds of things, but that would be seen as a reasonable accommodation. So just a few cases to kind of help you think through this. If you think about this question here, is the student guaranteed a spot on the team? Well, the short answer is no. gave you another case here. There was a case of a student who was, again, hearing impairment, was unable to wear hearing aids during basketball. The coach used hand signals, lip reading, dry erase boards, those kinds of things to help through the tryout period rather. But after these 3 days, the student was cut from the team. But in this particular case, it was due to poor ball handling skills. The student, did not make the team based on that. And in this case, when there was evidence of the coach really providing a lot of very reasonable accommodations, this student's cut from the team could be viewed as non-discriminatory. Okay. And then the last one I'll share with you, high school cheerleading case. There's been a lot of interesting high school cheerleading cases across the country. But we had a student who failed to make the cheerleading squad. And the parent claimed, well, it was because you didn't want to deal with my daughter's diabetes. However, analysis of the situation, student did try out, and information indicated low scores in skill areas. So there was evidence that it was a performance-based issue, and the school was found to not be unreasonable. So the root of the issue was that the daughter didn't make the team. It wasn't because of her diabetes. On the flip side, for example, if this particular student or a student similar to this one needed to take breaks or otherwise address her diabetic condition and the school refused that could be very different, and that could be viewed as discriminatory. So ultimately, bottom line, when we think about these things, and it really is supposed to be a consideration on page G of the IEP. Does the student have access to extracurriculars? We need to be reasonable, for sure, allowing students access to activities, trying out and participating, and providing reasonable accommodations. But there's not a guarantee per se of making teams. So that was just wanted to give you some food for thought there, and I can stop talking. Any thoughts or questions that people want to throw out there on this topic?
Ron, I was wondering what the school district has to provide in terms of the glucose monitoring. Just time and a space to do it, I'm guessing, rather than the materials to be able to do it? Right.
Angie, I can't speak the specifics of that case that he had shared. My assumption would be, in most cases, medications themselves and syringes are provided, by families, through medical insurance and so forth. But my best understanding, my thought would be, Angie, that would be more the time, the space, depending on the student situation, someone to help, those kinds of things. Yeah. And for that matter, it could be breaks, those kinds of things that aren't altering the game, but giving an accommodation to the student. All right, well, if there are no other questions out there, we can move on, and I will go ahead and go in and let me stop sharing, and I'll give access to those notes in case you would like to go back and look at those. Thank you.
Terrific. I'm up next on the agenda, and there are just a couple things that I wanted to keep on your radar screens with regards to transition and B13 updates. As you all are probably aware, the state is taking on a very huge task of reviewing many hundreds of transition age IEPs. And I wanted to let you know that the status of that in our agency is that we have our files assigned to us, and that we will begin that as a transition team in April. And we will probably take most of April and May and slightly into June to accomplish that. The transition team consists of Samantha Wilson, Mary McLaren, Nancy Lindgren, and Rebecca Hamilton, Amy Liddell, and myself. And there may be a few other special education reps who are interested in this activity and may join us. the next thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that Voc Rehab, VR, has a set of standard operating procedures. And what we've discovered in our agency is that there's kind of what appears to be an inconsistent application of those standard operating procedures across districts. And so we will be meeting in the next couple of weeks with Voc Rehab, and I anticipate that we will have some steps that we can move forward with to make sure that all districts are accessing Voc Rehab and getting, I'm going to say, the most out of their services, because those are not services that school districts pay for, but they are certainly highly integrated into the transition process. And so because they are, I think it would behoove districts to take advantage of all the services that they can supply to schools. So I will ask if there are any questions with regards to transition. Seeing none in the chat box and hearing none, I will pass it on to Angie. Are you ready, Ange?
Carrie, there's a question that just came up.
Okay, thanks.
I just indicated that each AEA is going to be reviewing over 600 IEPs, so it's quite an undertaking. When you said hundreds of IEPs, it's actually thousands.
Right. Hundreds for us.
Hundreds for us, right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
The first thing that I'm going to talk about is C to B transition. Just this last week, the Department of Ed held a task team meeting for looking at the transition from C to B. You know, anybody that's worked in as a SPED rep or a district preschool special ed teacher, elementary principal knows that that transition from C to B can be tough because they're two distinctly different types of services and supports to families and children. And the data from Part C doesn't always nicely fit into what we see as the requirements for Part B entitlement. So this transition task team has been developed with the Department of Education and AEA colleagues from across the state. And you can see here this is linked in your agenda. The purpose is to develop tools and resources to aid teams, the LEA and AEA teams, to use sources of data so we can have a smooth transition from C to B and to reduce the burden on families in terms of that transition being so different in terms of services and supports and the data needs. So the guiding principles of the work are, again, to maintain continuity of supports and services, to figure out what kinds of data from early access can be used to ensure comprehensive special education eligibility decisions. Early access has a lot of data, particularly for those children who have been in early access for close to 3 years. We do have a number of children that are referred at age 2.5. I think we would probably, I'll say most of those kids have speech needs because developmental needs are usually caught a little earlier, but not always. So we want to make sure we're using the data that we can to help make those decisions. Early access providers and special ed evaluators working together to ensure RIOT, the review, interview, observe, and test are all considered, and to make sure that the eligibility decisions are based on sound data. And that would be comprehensive, valid and reliable data and objective data. And that's been a struggle in the past. And so, you know, I applaud the Department of Education for looking at this as a need and gathering a group together. From our agency, I'm on that task force, Maureen Lonsdale, who is our early access regional liaison, and I believe Karen Spahn, who is a 3 to 5 consultant with the agency. We all represent Green Hills on that task force. We met last week, as I said, and our first homework assignment before our next meeting in early March is to look at each part of the IFSP. So all members of the task team were put into a small group to look at different components of the IFSP. And our charge as we do that is to look at these two questions. How does the data in each IFSP tab, and that's, instead of calling them a page like page F and page G and so forth, we call them tabs. So how does the data in each IFSP tab aid in addressing this eligibility requirement? So we're pouring through IFSPs, we're looking at the components of the IFSPs and really talking about what does that look like, or what could that look like in terms of addressing eligibility. And then additionally, what limitations exist. So if this isn't enough, what would make it better? So that task team is charged with looking at this. Our next meeting is March 9th, and we have, I think, one more meeting scheduled after that. So this is the first look at this particular issue from the state, and we're really hoping that that we can provide some tools and resources that the entire state can use in this transition from C to B. If any of you would have any thoughts or comments or questions about the data elements that you see perhaps missing or that you see helpful in determining Part B eligibility when the child's transitioning from C to B, go ahead and send me an email. That way I could take that information to the state as well. May not fit nicely into the section that I'm working on, but I can sure share that information from the field to begin to look at addressing these issues. So that was the first thing that I wanted to share with you. Are there any questions about that task team and what our purpose is? I hear somebody typing. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Let's see. Most of you know that the AEA, had a task team of our own that we put together, and we began looking at the whole idea of C to B transition. And we came to the conclusion in our small group that, because Part C and Part B are two completely different entities, you qualify for each entity in a different manner, that we really needed to have Part B as a bigger presence in that decision. There were many, many cases across our agency and in the state as well, where Part C seemed to be driving the Part B decision making. And, we were doing the best we can with the information that we had, but it really wasn't a collaborative effort of Part C and Part B working together. So we developed procedures for our staff to follow and for districts to support, which would allow our Part B staff, both at the AEA level and the LEA level, to have a more significant contribution to the process of Part C to Part B transition. So a guidance document and PowerPoint were sent out earlier and are available. They're linked in the agenda. What we wanted you to know is that Part B has a requirement during the transition process, to determine if they think this child is potentially eligible for Part B. So as we go down this transition pathway for children that are about 9 months to 3 months before their third birthday, we have to ask the question, do we think this child's potentially eligible for Part B, or do we think they're not potentially eligible for Part B? So that's kind of answering that suspicion question. So if we think they're potentially eligible for Part B, then we have to go down that suspect for disability process. That's just a requirement. It's in the federal regs, it's in our Iowa administrative rules for early access, and it's part of that child find process in the Part B land. So once we suspect that disability, we are going down that potential eligibility for Part B, then we have to begin that whole child find process. And that's where we're pulling our Part B folks in now more than ever. So we're wanting our AEA special ed representatives to be involved. We're trying to get our 3 to 5 consultants involved. We're wanting LEA, Part B staff to be involved, and administrators as they can to be involved in some of those transition conversations and in that suspect for disability process. And so what we've recommended, and you'll see that through the guidance documents, is that Part B staff really take ownership and facilitate all of those Part B processes. From the suspicion of disability, once it's kind of in that compartment, to the completion of the EER, to the beginning of the IEP, which in many cases our Part C staff were kind of beginning to write that IEP. And specifically to that, we felt like it wasn't necessarily appropriate for a Part C person to be writing an IEP for a Part B person to implement. That there was more value in the Part B people writing that to support the types of programs that they have and the types of structures and supports and services that they can provide to the students. So you have access to the guidance document. You have access to a PowerPoint that also describes the process. And what we've tried to do is to have our Part B and our Part C staff have meetings in all of our districts. If it hasn't happened in yours yet, please ask and ask that occur. But we're trying to make sure we're having some formal conversations between Part C and Part B staff at the AEA and the LEA level to make sure everybody has a firm grasp on what the process is going to be. We don't want to certainly dictate that everybody has to do this, 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 and this. We want there to be flexibility in the process, what meets each district unique and individual needs. But we also want to make sure that Part B is picking up the responsibilities that have been charged with Part B. We don't have a lot of time for questions here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I can't see if there are questions in the chat box right now. Looks like there might be one. But if you have questions, please contact an AEA regional administrator and we will work to try to answer any question that you might have. Question, will the SPED reps have access to IFSPs for more efficient access to the data? We are working on that. There are some technical issues in allowing Part B access to Part C stuff and Part C access to Part B stuff. For example, if a Part B person takes over the suspect for disability piece, then the Part C staff no longer have access to the IEP. So there are some technical things that we need to work out, but that's certainly on our radar, Sandy. And I'll go ahead and write that down to make sure we continue to think about that in terms of access. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Angie. Ron, it looks like we're back to you.
Okay, great. Let me quickly share my screen again. This is just really a brief reminder. It's kind of getting to that time of the year again where IEP teams need to think about extended school year services and whether or not students will need those kinds of summer services to have FAPE. Guidance, and we have the links there for you for your reference. One link just has a section of our state procedures that remind you of that thinking process of how IEP teams should go through the thinking process to determine student eligibility. And the other link here, I'm going to take you to really quickly. One that I actually like. It's actually on the Iowa DE webpage. There's kind of some informative sections on IEP information, and this one's been helpful to me. It's kind of a little bit of a streamlined guidance piece on how to walk through whether or not a student needs extended year summer services. Our procedures will tell us that we really should consider this at least 60 days before the beginning of services. That's to give IEP times to plan and potentially time if there's any disagreements between parents and schools, those kinds of things. But you can see here on this guidance, there's how to decide if a student needs extended school year services. The truth is it can seem gray sometimes. This is describing 3 main standards that an IEP team might use. If you read in the state procedures, it will say 4, but the 4th is really other considerations, leaving it even broader. But you can see the 3 main areas here: goal area of concern, something specific to a goal that a student may need to work on in the summer. This regression-based standard. So this consideration of if the student has a lapse in their specially designed instruction, will there be enough regression that it would take an unreasonable period of reteaching to recoup those skills? So discussion, looking at data to think about that issue. And then also the rare and unusual circumstances. And those can be many. One example that we sometimes give for rare and unusual, it's just one of many examples, but for what if a student, let's say a preschool student, just began to talk or began to use words, that might be a rare and unusual circumstance where an IEP team might say, we really don't believe that we should stop services in May here when the student's on a threshold of a really important skill like that. So these are the 3 areas that we're to look at. Under rare and unusual, again, some ideas, some phrases that might help you. Is a student in a critical stage of development, kind of like the one I described? Is there something that would require continuous or year-round treatment, if that's really part of the methodology, where a lapse of a couple months would be problematic? Some other examples of things that you could think of. I also like in this section, there are some questions, and this is actually not in the state procedures, and it lives here, and I kind of like them. So it can kind of be difficult for IEP teams to figure out, does the student need it, do they not need it? Because we know this is really, this is not for every student does not need this. It's not designed for students to advance their skills, but more commonly it's used to avoid significant regression. So I would just suggest that these critical questions might be a good list for your IEP teams to have. If there's a struggle on whether or not the student needs extended year, the team could walk through some or all of these questions, and that might help point them in the right direction. And as the guidance is kind of suggesting here, if the IEP team answers yes to any of the above questions, then there should be some serious consideration given to extended year. So, all right, any questions? This was really meant to be more of just a reminder that it's that time of the year where we would often be thinking about whether or not students need this service. Any questions from the field out there?
You nailed it, Ron. Thank you very much.
Yep.
That's my pleasure to intro Julie Jensen.
All right, thank you, David, and it's a privilege to be with Green Hills this morning and this afternoon. So the role that I play is supporting special ed leadership, and every day is just continues to make me feel good about the work that's out there and how many people are working so hard. So just a few updates. Thomas and I actually met earlier this week and said, okay, let's not repeat each other on for today. So I'm going to do a couple follow-ups on his information. One is, and you probably have this as well, the 4+ programming. There is, Kim Drew is doing a Zoom meeting this afternoon, I think from 1:30 to 3, I believe is the time frame. That's going to be recorded, and will be up on the department's website under transition services as soon as she is able to release that. So if there's more questions on that area, the Zoom might give you some guidance on that. And then secondly, when Thomas started and he shared such good information about what we're working on with graduation requirements and regular high school diploma, just to reinforce that and to let you know, I'm on that task team with the department, and we're in cooperation with SAI and IASB as well. So that should help for local school districts when we get to a point where there may be a possibility where a board policy might need to be updated a little bit more as well. So combination with the AA's department, SAI and IASB all working on hopefully giving out good guidance on that. Then as far as update on a new IEP system, if you have been in the loop or if you've heard our Director of Special Education, Barb Guy, talk, she talked this fall knowing there were some challenges with TIER, and she would say her fingers and toes were crossed and anything else possible to see if the challenges could be worked out. And as of Monday, what we have heard is that that winter window for TIER and FAST has been a lot more successful. And so the attorneys are still talking, but it looks very favorable as far as being able to say that we can move forward with that new IEP program as we were hoping to. So that being said, she said, yes, go ahead. You can say that we're going to aim for July of 2018 for that new IEP program to be open and training available for that. We'll be working with AEA directors on what that looks like as soon as we get the green light and not just a real positive yellow light on that one. And then finally, the work that I've been able to have supported is I'm going to say by July. And so this spring, I'm going to be asking for some volunteers. We will have a new website linked on the department, which will have all of our legal information in one place. So the administrative Iowa code will be there. The Dear Colleague letters that Ron does such a nice job of updating you guys on, and Thomas's state guidance information will all be in one place. And so what we'll envision with that is, let's say you have questions on specialized transportation, and there'll be a search there. You'll be able to put in your words and then find out all the legal guidance and all current information that might be out there on that. So come spring, and spring being April, May-ish, which is such a busy time for all of us, but I will be asking for some volunteers just to look through the possible website and what we want to tweak before it would go live by July or August. So those are current department updates. I don't see any questions in chat. All right. Okay, thanks, David, for letting me have a few minutes there.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more as things roll out. Any questions for Julie? Last check. Okay. Well, the next item is mine. And we just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk with you about the role of the primary point of contact, those of you who are online today. In what we would ask would be that communicating back to others who aren't able to attend today. So you're here getting all this good information, and it is our hope that you will then go back and share with your respective teams, other teachers, other administrators. If you're an administrator, sharing it with your special ed teams, whatever that might look like. but our hope is just to spread the word that way through you, each of you acting as that point of contact for us. And also, you can work with your special ed reps too to help communicate that information as well. What we would like to know along those lines is, how can we help you with that communication? Are there things that we can do to make that communication better, easier, more fluid? What can we do to make it better? And so I'm going to ask that question and then just turn back to the group and say, what can we do to help you communicate with more teachers, with your administrative team, whoever it might be? This group is more quiet than a group of superintendents, I tell you. Ask them a question. Any thoughts? Oh, we got one. Are we videotaping these sessions? Absolutely, because Pat Rabbit reminded me to hit the button. We are. This will be available on YouTube by the end of the day. I'm becoming a YouTuber. Go figure. My kids will be happy. Thank you for that question. Any other thoughts about how we can help you with communication of this? I suppose one of the things we could do too would be to push out the link to that video once it is posted to YouTube. All right. What is the appropriate wait time when you're on Zoom like this with 35 people? I don't know. 5 minutes? Andy, you're saying 5 minutes? Oh, 5 seconds. She already counted me down.
That's too short.
All right. Well, if you have more thoughts, don't hesitate to put them in the chat window. Don't hesitate to email me or any of my administrative team here. All right, Angie, I'm going to toss it to you.
All right, thank you, David. We just wanted to share with you the ongoing work that we're doing in the area of our special education representatives to begin to bring more consistency to practice. Well, that's not working. Ah. All right, we'll see if that works. All right, so a couple of years ago, we had a group of folks that actually they volunteered to be a part of a task team to look at the different roles and responsibilities that they were engaged in on a daily basis. So we reviewed, we had charts of paper and we wrote down just all kinds of things that the special ed reps do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. After we did those, we went through and we kind of culled the list and we classified each duty and activity. And I'll talk about how we classified them here in a minute, but after we did that, then we wanted to make sure that we're providing ongoing and targeted professional learning for folks. So those things that we know we need to be doing as special education reps, we feel like we're doing them well. And so we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. And additionally, for those things that we determined that we really shouldn't be doing because they're outside of that special education realm, how can we transition away from those? So those were some specific conversations that we had at this task team. And part of the rationale for doing this, and most of you have seen this before, and I know that you can't read it necessarily, but we were concerned about the defensible use of special education funds. Obviously, there are some things that we absolutely are supposed to be doing because they're geared towards supporting special ed teachers and special ed students to help them be more successful as learners. There are also those things that occasionally and incidentally we can be involved in. For example, if you have a student in the STAT process that you're really needing some, gosh, you just aren't quite sure what you need to do next, or you're thinking about moving on towards a child find process and suspect for disability, to call us in for a consultation or consultation on other things that are very short-term, very limited in scope. And then there are those things that absolutely we shouldn't be doing. general education instruction, mental health groups for non-IEP students, those kinds of things. And so that's really kind of the impetus for why we did that, as well to think about the consistency of practice across the AEA. I mean, we have a lot of special ed reps and with various backgrounds, and we all have those things that we kind of like to do, those things that we're asked to do by districts and by the AEA, and we wanted to try to pull it all together just a little bit more. So after we went through our list of all the activities and things that we engage in, what we did was we kind of put them into 4 categories. We called them 4 levels. Those level A activities are things that are required for the SPED reps to do. We hold special training, we're expected to perform those, and you know, that the whole child find process would be one thing that we hold special training in. You know, we're expected to lead the work on the EER, lead the work in the review of data to determine entitlement and so forth. So that would be classified as a level A activity. A level B activity are things that we hold special training in. We're needed by the AEA to perform those tasks. We try to lead those or support those. There may be people in the LEA that also have capacity to lead those things internally, and that's great. But we know that that's going to be a part of the responsibility that we have as special ed reps with Green Hills. Level C activities are things that we may hold special training in, but really they're not within the realm of what we should be doing on a regular basis. So our hope is that special ed reps can work to build capacity in the LEA and perhaps help the LEA find another person that can hold that work within the job that they do. So anything that we would do in level C really would be short term, occasional and incidental, and with the hope of transferring that job, that duty, that activity to LEA folks. The final piece would be things that the level D activities, that those are really not things we shouldn't participate in. It's not legally defensible in terms of using special education resources, and we really need to be redirecting those things to either other AEA people or folks within the LEA. A couple of the things that came up as activities that sometimes we're asked to do would be to participate in a child fair. So there's 2 days of child fair. You have 100 or 200 kids coming through, and the special ed rep sits at the exit table and hands parents, a report or some materials. That's not a legally defensible use of special education funds. I think our staff have also been asked to do playground duty or to help teach a class before. And so we wanted to make sure that our staff knew that that's not something that they were to be participating in, and to redirect those to other appropriate personnel. The other thing that we did is we tried to categorize each of the activities that we engage in into Tier 1, universal, targeted, post-consent, and once the student is entitled, the kinds of things that we can do. And as you might imagine, if it's in the universal or Tier 1, as we called it, there's not going to be a lot that special ed reps are going to be doing. It's going to be more occasional and incidental, consultative. And a Tier 4 entitled, obviously we would have in-depth involvement in. I'm going to show you an example of just the Tier 1 universal, something that we put together. Some people were asked to collect, organize, and analyze universal screening data for the district or for a building. And obviously that's a universal kind of activity. And while the special ed reps should know how to access and organize and interpret the data, they should be really using it only for a specific purpose, which would be for intervention pieces, disability suspect, EER, and or reevaluation information. So that would not be something that we would be involved in on a regular and routine basis. A child fair or kindergarten roundup activity, as I mentioned earlier, would be under that category D, which was something that we shouldn't be involved in. And we would hope to find someone else within the district, or in some cases in the AEA, to provide that support. And you can see in this particular screenshot that the SER Child Fair Guidance document is blue and has a line under it. This is a document that's used with our special ed reps, and there are links throughout the document to different guidances. And so Child Fair Guidance document is one of those, and those are linked in your agenda, but it allows our staff to kind of see, and LEAs to see what it is that we could, would, should, and do within that activity, and what are some non-examples. So let's see. Hang on just a minute. The guidance documents that we've created so far are the kindergarten roundup one, 504 participation, request for screening and request for autism screening, participation in student assistance teams, participation in IEP meetings and in writing IEPs, and we are looking at others as needed. We, as I said, have linked the guidance documents in your handout or in the agenda. And so this talks about, this is the one for student assistance teams. What is a student assistance team? What do the Iowa administrative rules say about student assistance teams or general education interventions? What can an AEA special ed rep support? What are permissible types of participation in STAT process could look like, and what non-examples would look like. For example, a standing member of a student assistance team, a coordinator or facilitator, regular reviews of intervention progress, collecting and organizing and analyzing universal screening data. So it is hoped that through the development of these various guidance documents and sharing those with districts and having good conversations with our AEA SPED reps and our districts, that we can begin to pull back our work and some of those things that we shouldn't be involved in, and focused our time and energy on really supporting our students with disabilities and our teachers through consultative and coaching and modeling kinds of supports. You should have access to each of those guidance documents. Again, I said we are continuing to look at what else we might need to provide a guidance for. If you feel like either as a special education rep or as a district rep that you have a question or concern about any of these, please contact the regional administrator for your district, and they can help kind of work through that process. If you're not quite sure who in the district to maybe appoint to something that a special ed rep has kind of taken over in the past, contact that regional administrator, and they might be able to help with that process. Now, for a few of you that have purchased time of a special ed rep, you may have purchased a couple of days or half time or whatever, they can do what you ask them to do. But in terms of being on AEA time, we're really trying to get out of the business of doing general education type activities and really focused on this special education, those legally defensible activities. So I don't see any questions right off, but please, if you have questions, go ahead and touch base with your regional administrator. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to share some information on open enrollment. I know we're running out of time here. Give me a second. And this is something that we brought to your attention in the fall. I believe we shared it in September. It was new to the procedures manual in terms of involving the AEA with open enrollment discussions for students with IEPs. But the procedures manual specifically talks about the determination being made in consultation with the resident district and the appropriate AEA before the approval of the application. We felt like this was really timely in that the open enrollment applications are due March 1st. And so sometime after that time, you all that have received open enrollment requests are going to be reviewing those to determine, can we provide FAPE in our district for this student with an IEP? The procedures manual also talks about the AEA Director of Special Education designates the AEA professionals who will participate in this consultation process. For now, that means an AEA regional administrator. We know in Council Bluffs and in our larger districts, this could be kind of a huge undertaking, but that's what the direction Mark has given us right now. And I'm sorry he couldn't be here today. He's gallivanting off in some other country right now. But for now, he has appointed or designated regional administrators to be involved in those discussions. So what that means is if you have an open enrollment request for a student with an IEP, when you have this consultation to determine whether your district can provide FAPE, you need to invite the AEA regional administrator for your district to that conversation. I have put together and kind of vetted it through some other folks, a recommended practice, and this would just be to support you. And this is really based on the work that we've done at Connections Virtual Academy, Iowa Connections Academy, because they do this all the time. And they get a number of open enrollment requests of students with IEPs, and it's been something that they've kind of honed over time, and it works really well. So this is kind of what we're recommending to you, and there is a guidance document within the agenda for you that has more information. But what we would recommend is that anytime you receive an open enrollment request, whether it is for that March 1st deadline for the following year, or if it's a special circumstance where a family moved or something like that, you always check to see if that student has an IEP. Oftentimes a parent, for whatever reason, does not check that the student is in special education. So it's important for what, whoever's doing the checking to make sure you know if that student has a current IEP. The next step would be for the receiving LEA to set up a conference call with the AEA regional administrator. We would like to, in most cases, especially if it's perhaps a questionable case, to have the AEA special ed rep involved for that district. In some cases, it's going to be a simple learning disability with reading, and you may not need that. So invite those folks in the resident district. You do not invite the parent to this. Invite them to a conference call. We've done it at Connections Academy through sending a Google invite, and there's an example provided in that document. You make the call, and we've provided a script that kind of sets the stage for the call. This is not an IEP meeting. We're reviewing the IEP to determine whether we think the receiving district can implement the IEP and provide the FAPE. So then you're going to be looking at the components of the IEP, for example, the goal, the Form B, the services and supports, behavior plan, and so forth. So it's a real thorough review and discussion. And then the facilitator asks for feedback, comments, questions. And then within about a 20 to 30 minute time frame after you've done this, you should, in most cases, be able to say, yes, I think we can provide FAPE, or no, I can't. In a very rare circumstance, you may postpone the decision and have another meeting. Perhaps you need another person, involved in the discussion. If the district decides they cannot provide FAPE, you must provide a prior written notice and procedural safeguards to the parent. And again, we've provided an example of what that might look like. And then the superintendent, just so you know, the superintendent can also say, we don't have the space. Even if you've said, yes, we could provide FAPE to the student, the superintendent can always say, we don't have the space for this child, so we're going to decline it. So he has the ultimate veto power on that piece of it. You don't have to send prior written notice if it was determined that there's insufficient space. Cautions and think abouts. One thing that you have to be careful, and I think it's particularly easy with a physical disability or even a behavioral disability, to say, nope, we're not going to accept them. Please know, I had kind of an eye-opening experience when I started working with Connections Academy. As I reviewed an IEP, I'm thinking, gosh, I don't think that they can serve this kid this way. And by golly, they would say, yes, I could. So to unilaterally deny someone on the basis of their disability or behavioral goals is not appropriate. So be cautious of that. I've listed some of those good cause exceptions, and then additionally for a prospective kindergarten student, they can petition by September 1st, the year of their enrollment. So I have included in your link there the open enrollment handbook that the Department of Education updates each year, the open enrollment application request guidance document with examples. And just real quick, I hope that you can see this. This is the document that I've crafted that can help you kind of through this process. A sample Google Calendar request. So you could just stick this right in your Google Calendar request as you're inviting people to the meeting. You can put contact information in there, phone numbers, times, whatever. You can also attach a PDF copy of the student's IEP and the open enrollment request into the Google invite. Here's a sample script for the beginning of the meeting. Sample prior written notice if you refuse. Sample superintendent letter. And so hopefully everything that you would have or need to have guidance would be included in this. If you have suggestions for me to alter or change anything, please let me know. But really it's about a 20 to 30 minute conversation. You walk through the process, review the IEP, and you do the best job that you can in determining whether your district can, in fact, provide FAPE to the student. So quick and dirty, again, you have access to that Google Doc for your own purpose. And I would guess sometime in March or April or May, you're going to start having these kinds of meetings. So please remember to invite your AA regional administrator. Sorry for going over.
Any questions for Angie? Thank you, Angie, very much for your presentation on that topic. I am going to put together an email for superintendents just to make sure they're on the same page as well. Any questions for left after the conversations today? Okay, hearing none. As I said before, feel free to shoot any of us an email if you have a question about a particular topic. We will gladly respond to that. As I said, somebody asked earlier, is this being recorded? Yes, it is, and it will be shared via YouTube. We'll send you out the link as soon as it's there. And also we have one last request for today, and that would be to give us some feedback about today's meeting. There's a link at the bottom of the agenda. Go in there and take a minute or two and fill that out. We want these meetings to be about information that you need. So take the opportunity to give us that feedback through that link at the bottom of the agenda. All right, thank you everybody. Have a great day. Be careful out there in the snow.